White Sox fans, welcome into Sunday Funday with Sox on Tap. It's Jonnie here alongside Tony on Tap. Tony, how you doing, my friend? Crack 'em. Happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday, Jonnie. It's been better, but at least we have no clear direction to talk about here on this show.
Crap like that. Can't be
crap
getting
like
into
that and crap like that.
Yeah, can't be getting into crap like that. We're going to try to get into some crap like that, Tony. We'll talk about that. We've got the weekend series, a split with Cleveland. Eventful trade deadline so far. I don't know if they're done or not yet, but we'll see. That deadline coming up on Tuesday. And then, it's going to be a different looking team from here on out. And we'll get into all of that. But before we do, make sure you're subscribed on Tap Sportsnet on YouTube. Jump in the comment section here. Like our guy NWI Steve down from Hotlanta, just like that. But on Tap Sportsnet YouTube, drop your comments and there. We'll feature them just like that below. You can do it from Facebook too. Unfortunately, can't get the Twitter ones in there. YouTube, Facebook, go check it out on Tap Sportsnet. All right, Tony, let's start weekend series here. Hey, a split. I didn't see that coming. Did you?
Definitely didn't see a split coming in this series, Jonnie. In fact, I thought that this was going to be one win max for the Chicago White Sox. We have started trading away players. Cleveland has pretty much owned the White Sox since the last 2-3 years here. And it's good to see the White Sox actually split one. There was some fun in there, Jonnie. There was a little bit of fun in there for 2 games in a row. It looked like the White Sox were having some fun. I really liked yesterday. There was some emotion coming from certain White Sox players, sort of throwing it back at the Guardians and rocking the baby in front of Josh Naylor. I liked seeing that. I liked the emotion. Man, it seems like every time we play Cleveland, they just own us. They're able to make fun of us openly in front of us and sort of just walk all over us, man. You didn't see that from the White Sox, at least in 2 of the 4 games in this series. I was happy with that. Today was a little flat, but overall, it's a split here. And it was more than I expected to see from White Sox baseball this weekend.
Yeah, no, I definitely did. I was thinking maybe salvage 1 out of the 4-game weekend series. Obviously, Thursday, they got the best of us. But then I was there Friday. That was fun seeing our guy Sean Roberts there. And we brought him a winner, a shutout, too, at that 3-0. That was cool before the weather rolled in. And then Saturday, like you had said, hey, all the guys that are supposed to be doing it were, clicking. Yohan Moncada had a clutch hit in there. You had a home run from Andrew Vaughn. You had Tim Anderson finally hit a home run, Tony.
Did that really happen?
That might be the most unexpected, feat of the weekend.
Yeah, I was surprised. I mean, leadoff home run. He was back in the leadoff spot. Benintendi out of the lineup in that ball game, but Tim Anderson leading a game off with a home run. It was like vintage White Sox times here, Jonnie. Just absolutely vintage White Sox times. I wonder if he got pasta at home. We're working to confirm.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously that situation's another discussion there. But that I wrote a quick post about it over at ontapsportsnet.com. You can go check it out. But the drought, 379 days. I know obviously that includes the offseason there, but over a full calendar year, because what the last one was July 15th of 2022, a game at Minnesota. So yeah, that's a long power outage for TA there. Glad he was able to snap it. And he absolutely smoked that ball. He's a mostly middle away hitter, which is, and I think Frank Thomas has made this point a bunch of times, one of the greatest hitters in White Sox history, saying that TA is at his best when he goes middle away. And obviously that's where a majority of his hits are going to come. But my God, I love a good pull shot. That was, up there in those seats in left field.
Yeah, and he also had that one hit in Minnesota where he had to run the bases. It was a grand slam, but it was foul. I was thinking
in Oakland, yeah.
Or in Oakland, sorry. I thought when he hit his first, it was going to go to right field. I was kind of shocked, to be honest with you, where that ball ended up. It didn't even look like he had a full swing on it. So he sort of stopped the bat about 3/4 of the way through. And he just looks super happy rounding the bases and then gets back to the dugout. And that's where you saw that emotion start to come out of the White Sox dugout. I liked what you brought up yesterday in the Sox on Tap group chat about Tim Anderson being emotional over this home run. But for lack of a better term, you saw the White Sox actually happy in their dugout for what felt like the first time in a long time. Yes, they've shown some semblance of good times happening within the dugout after a couple of victories or some home runs. The home run gangsta jacket, as we like to call it here, has come out a couple of times, but that was like the first real pure joy I saw in that dugout since probably Jose Abreu was in that dugout. Johnny, I don't know if you can point to any other times where you saw it throughout the season, but I'm pretty sure you haven't seen that since Jose Abreu was in the dugout.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and that's kind of like flat. There were flashes. I think that's a good way to put it there, like flashes of it at certain times. But this team has always done that. They in early June swept like Detroit, and you were thinking that maybe this is finally like they're going to do something, but then they showed who they really are by going out and losing series and stuff like that after that, and it just damaged morale of the team. And you heard it from some of these guys that exited, and we'll get into the trades a little more in depth in a little bit. But when you just hear Joe Kelly and the Lance Lynns of the world, and they're talking about, this is what happens when you don't perform. Nobody's happy, but when you're losing games, they've been doing a lot of losing since the second half of the 2021 season, really, if you go back and look at it there. So that's, unfortunately a byproduct of that. I'm going to be flat in the dugout, but it was, even if it was just for one night here, nice to see that. And I think it speaks to Tim Anderson's presence in there too. I know he's caught a lot of flack, and obviously for the on-field performance, definitely not up to his standard. Injury played a part in that, but there were other factors that went into that. But it goes back to our whole set the tone thing, right? When he was going right, you go and look at the White Sox record when he was in the lineup over the window, and it's something that you can't replace, really. It feels like that's kind of like infectious. Saw other guys get up for him in that dugout with that little dance that they did after he came back in. So that's it's the stuff that doesn't make the stat sheet too, that you definitely miss. But unfortunately, it feels like too little too late, because that was just happened after they traded the majority, not a majority, but a really good chunk of their innings pitched here this season, with all the starters and relievers going out the door to new teams.
Yeah, and Johnny, I don't know. We'll get into, as you said, we'll get into some of the trades and what that means. I don't know if there was sort of a lift after the White Sox made these moves within the clubhouse. Pressure comes off a little bit, and you start to just relax. I don't want to say this team was pressing through most of this season, or even if you go back to the second half of 21, because I don't think they were pressing. And in fact, most times they looked lackadaisical. But maybe with the pressure off, you get a little bit more of that environment that you saw in 2017, 2018, even into 2019, a little bit there, where guys loosen up a little bit and they're just having fun. For lack of a better term. I know this isn't fun. They're not in a good position to be having a lot of fun, but you sort of put the final nail in the coffin on any sort of hope for a run here with the moves that have been made. Not that they were going to be able to do so. The gap is certainly large enough, but once you start to get the officialness of these moves, I think you can sort of take some of that pressure off some of the guys. And Tim Anderson, probably a main benefactor of that. Now he's still a potential trade candidate for this team, so maybe he's starting to take notice of whether or not he's being evaluated by certain individuals or certain teams for his future here. But it was just a different feeling over those past couple of days. Now, of course, they come out today and lay a stinker on us, and had no semblance of any sort of fight, it felt like, from the White Sox lineup. But overall, it was good to see. I do want to get into some of the pitching, Johnny, through this 4-game set. I think that it was sort of surprising in a couple of different ways, and some recent trends that I've sort of noticed. Touki Toussaint has been sort of a diamond in the rough guy. I don't know if you've got thoughts on him.
Touki the ace.
Yeah.
Touki the ace. Hey, how about, was at a 5 inning scoreless outing for him on Friday night. That was definitely surprising. But I'll give him credit because he stepped into a situation where he essentially needs to eat innings for guys that were previously injured and now guys that are traded, no longer on the team. So they're going to need him. He's going to be in the rotation. Obviously, I think he's part of the probables for that Texas series too, coming up. So they're going to need him. And hey, he's doing what is asked of him. And if you go and look at the numbers, I don't think anybody can be disappointed in what Tuki Toussaint's done. So that's a good little pickup to, just like I said, cover some innings or innings that still need covering to finish out the season. And speaking of that, Mike Clevenger comes back from the injured list and drops 5 scoreless of his own on Saturday night. Obviously he's a name that is always, talked about for the on-field stuff that occurred after his acquisition and prior to the season. But man, go and look at the numbers. Sure, the peripherals might not be the sexiest in the world, but how often is Dylan Cease getting you through 5 scoreless this year? How often is Michael Kopech getting you through 5 scoreless this year? I don't know. I thought I liked what I saw from him coming back, looked fairly strong. So that was good to see. And who knows, maybe he could be another guy. You talked about Tim Anderson. Maybe if that's enough for other teams, if they want to take a chance on, I'm sure you're not going to get anything amazing out of it. But what Steve had said previously, you can't win the lottery if you don't play, right? So if you take a flyer on one of these guys, and then even if you don't move them, I think for next year you pick up the club option, then aim to have him, pitch at this kind of level next year, first half, hopefully limit the injuries, and then flip him then. That's also a possibility there too. So a couple avenues you can go down here.
Remember, we're focused on competing next season, Johnny. This is not a rebuild. That's the first time I'm going to throw that out there and crap like that. Crap like that. So I like what we've seen from Mike Clevenger outside of the injuries from an on the field performance standpoint this season. I know that there's some people who've said, let's try and get him dealt within the next couple of days here before the trade deadline takes place. But for all intents and purposes, Johnny, a question for you. Are you picking up that option on him next season, bringing him back to eat these innings, or are you going to try and potentially move him over the offseason, cut ties with him at the end of the year? I sort of look at what we've got from a rotation standpoint right now, and you bring up a really good point. And we'll talk about Michael Kopech in a second because I want to talk about his start today. But Kopech hasn't been doing it. You've got some news out of, Garrett Crochet getting himself re-injured. I know he's sort of a fringe name for a rotation next season. Dylan Cease, Mr. Immovable from the Chicago White Sox. Everybody's been reporting that he is not going to move. So you've got basically Dylan Cease locked in as your number one guy next year, pending any other weird craziness that takes place. But then you've got a bunch of other names in here. Tuki Toussaint, is he back? Can Michael Kopech remain a starter? I know that's a big question. You've got Mike Clevenger. You've got the option of Mike Clevenger. And then it's a bunch of question marks really from there. I can't in my right mind sort of move this guy. I want your thoughts on this.
Right. I think you just laid out the case there. Look at the names at who's actually going to be in the rotation next year. And I think that is my answer right there, is that if I was GM of the White Sox, I would exercise the option. I think it's mutual, so they have to agree on it. But given his injury issues that he had this year, I feel like that would probably be a fair number for him to want to go in on that with the White Sox there. And like I said, you need guys to be able to cover those innings and have some of it. Now I go back to numbers this year overall. That's a decent depth starter. If you're looking at the numbers, sure, you need him healthy for more than he has been, but it's pretty straightforward in my mind, and that the plan would be to have him on team to start next year, and then depending on where you're at direction wise, look to flip him at the deadline, because they're just use a Godfather quote, there just wasn't enough time. I don't think that one outing that he had just here on Saturday night, right before the trade deadline, coming off a month plus absence, is enough for the team to be totally convinced of it. But who knows? Like you said, craziness can happen around the deadline. Teams get desperate if they see, we got to come in here. Storm Chaser Kenneth says Rangers making moves. Yeah, they're acquiring pitchers left and right. So maybe one of these other contenders does want to jump on that, throw their hat in the ring for depth starter and Mike Clevenger. Who knows on that front? But assuming he does stay with the Sox, the team's not going in on it given the injuries this year, then I would bring him back. That'd be my answer.
Yeah, Rangers are making some moves, and I hope Kenneth is an actual storm chaser if he has that in his name. I hope he's chasing some tornadoes or something out there. I know a storm chaser, Tony Twista.
Ken and Tony Twista could be good friends.
Yeah, they can be good friends. We'll see if they know each other at some point. Jonnie, it could get crazy. You never know. But I do want to talk about this Michael Kopech thing because I saw a ton of different takes online about should Michael Kopech be back in the starting rotation for the Chicago White Sox next year. And before I get into some of the numbers that I pulled during his start today, I want to hear your thoughts on just Kopech in general and what you think the longevity is.
Yeah, that's a tough question right now because the command is just rough. It is an interesting case with him because he has shown, once again, I feel like this is just a theme overall with the team, shown flashes of brilliance, right? You have certain starts where he looks dominant. I mean, in the pregame show, they're showing the highlights of that start in May against the Royals where he went like 8 innings and he just was, just shutting them down. And usually when he's on, he limits hits too. So he's not having a lot of traffic on the base pass except for the walks when he is on. But then when he's not on, he's walking in runners like you're seeing today. So that's an issue that needs to get fixed. And I think it's going to come down to if they identify it, can they fix that over the offseason? And honestly, you just laid out all those options there when you're talking about would you bring back Mike Clevenger. For the same reason, I would be inclined to try and fix it and get him back in the rotation next year. But that is like the final straw. That's kind of where I would be. And if this stuff kind of persists, then you know what? I would not like try to word it to him the best I can. Whoever's making the decision has to relay it to him that, hey, in order to extract the max value out of you and for what you are able to contribute and be at your best, bullpen, you can be an absolute shutdown guy in this role. Pipe him up in that way. And, that is hopefully something that would be, you saw him be effective out of the bullpen when he was on the TJ recovery, track back into MLB for a full season there. But if you go and put him in, I know it was Ozzie Guillen saying that you'd like to see like Kopech be in like somewhat of like a closer, high leverage role. I think that's certainly on the table, something you can do. But once you go that route, you can't come back. So I would, you technically could, but I mean, realistically, you're not going to do that because you got to build up a guy as a starter. So I would give it another run as a starter, given the options for next year and the banking on the flashes, right? Because people were kind of, iffy on Dylan Cease when he had his issues, when he was still, developing into his own at the big league level. And then you saw a season where he finishes this runner up for the Cy Young. I don't know if Kopech's, getting top 3 votes for Cy Young next year, but if you iron it out, a little more consistency, you know that he can be an effective arm when right.
Yeah, absolutely, Jonnie. And I'll go into some of the numbers I was looking at. You know me, I'm a huge baseball savant guy, Jonnie, and I live in the nerd world of baseball, and I just pour over these things all the time. But I actually did do that today with Michael Kopech when the start was taking place, specifically in the second inning where he had had a little trouble with the command. I wanted to figure out what exactly was wrong with him this year. And the one thing that I remember people talking about coming into the 2023 season with Kopech and even just, going back was he was a 2-pitch pitcher, fastball, slider. And then, he does mix in a curve occasionally. And they really wanted to develop his changeup this year, Jonnie. And that's, you saw the videos in spring training of him working with Katz and Grandal, talking about how effective that changeup could be as a third pitch for Kopech, developing into a more efficient starter. One thing that we knew about Michael Kopech, even back when he was pitching, I believe it was 2018, 2019, right before the TJ and the 2020 opt-out season. So 2019 there, he relied on that slider a lot as his put-away pitch. I don't have the numbers right in front of me from 2019, but I do have that slider looking right here, 21, 22, 23. In 2021, the whiff rate on the slider was 36%. The expected batting average on it, 176, and the hard hit rate, 22%. When we moved Kopech from the bullpen into the starting rotation, Jonnie, you see a huge dip in the slider effectiveness. Whiff rate goes from 36% down to 21.8. Expected batting average 240, hard hit up to 40% in 2022. And it gets worse this year, 26.8% on the whiff rate. So he did increase the whiff rate on it. However, the expected batting average goes up to a 264. This is prior to today's start. And the hard hit rate goes up to 45.7%. So that slider that he used as a put away pitch, something's wrong with it. I'm not a pitching coach. I don't know how to fix it. But all the talk about Michael Kopech entering this year was developing tertiary pitches to, the curveball, the changeup, everything that needed to be done to add another pitch to his arsenal that was as effective. You've actually seen him go to the changeup a lot more than the slider as a put away pitch. I don't know if that's going to be a problem. I don't know if it's just a development thing or if we're still trying to do that develop at the major league level thing that we complain about as White Sox fans over and over again. But you see in 2021 in the bullpen, in that shutdown role that he had sort of as a setup guy, that slider was absolutely fucking nasty. It was working. It was getting hitters out. It's not anymore. And that's his second most thrown pitch still to this day. He sort of relies on it behind that fastball, and that fastball is susceptible to leave the yard. This thing's leaving the yard now too. That doesn't exactly give me a lot of confidence going into next year. I don't, again, not a pitching coach, don't know how to fix it, but just looking at these numbers, I sort of puke in my mouth a little bit.
Right. I think one thing that needs to be considered here is that possibility that not entirely right physically. Obviously had an IL stint earlier this year, and you had Steve Stone mention it too on the broadcast today when Pedro came out and they were like looking at him, and I know Kopech ended up staying in the game and pitching 5 today, but when Steve Stone notices that, he's former pitcher himself, I would be inclined to believe him. That's something, I think he pointed to the shoulder and something not being totally right there. He was able to battle through it and, throw 5, because that was still in like the second, third inning there when the mound visit happened there. So I think that needs to be taken into consideration. Maybe that's part of it that's plaguing him on that this year. Another part is mental too, because, I think Steve says it all the time here. You need to pitch with conviction, be the, fuck you, I'm getting you out. Believe that every single time you're winding up throw a pitch there. So those are parts of it. But in terms of the actual technical, mechanical stuff, that's something for Ethan Katz. And is he as, effective as touted by some? Can he fix him? Can Katz fix him? Can Coop fix him? Can Katz fix him? Is a big question. But once again, I'll go back to really ingesting stuff like that, that rundown of the effectiveness of the slider that you just gave, and doing everything they can to get that back on track going into next season. Because in my keyboard GM here, I am keeping Kopech in the rotation and trying to get the version of him that is the shutdown guy. There were stretches last year, and then once again earlier on in this season too, that give me some hope that he can figure it out. But those are some pretty technical questions and issues that need to be addressed then this offseason. So let's hope he has a good offseason.
Yeah, I would hope so too, Jonnie. You can couple that with a couple other things that I saw in there. The fastball velocity is down about 2-3 miles an hour overall. I think that's just sort of a byfactor of, being in the starting rotation, having to go or attempt to go longer in ball games, right, as well as some of the physical stuff that you talked about. Yeah. So, he's already had that one IL stint where it was, give him some extra rest. We're getting close to him having, sort of at least trending towards career high innings pitched and pitches thrown this season. You hope he can get there. It'll be interesting to see what kind of moves they make with him. Obviously, we talked a little bit about Garrett Crochet wants to be a starter next season. We'll see how that pans out. He's another guy that's had some injury issues, and from a pitch arsenal standpoint, who knows what'll happen there. But I'm a little nervous about how we're going to cover some innings next season. Not so much this year, but as we enter the 24 season, Jonnie, I think that's one of my biggest question marks.
Yeah, I think that has a lot to do with what this team's direction is. So I know we can't discuss crap like that, but we're going to discuss crap like that because the trade deadline shook up a lot of things. You took out two of your main starting pitchers in Lucas Giolito and Lance Lynn. I know you and Steve talked a little bit about the Lucas Giolito Reynaldo Lopez trade on the night that it happened Wednesday, but since then, Lynn and Kelly out of town to the Dodgers, and then and Kendall Graveman going back to Houston. So let's talk some trades. White Sox trade deadline here, Tony, with these guys. Once again, you guys touched on Lucas Giolito and Raylo, but you get the number 2 prospect in the Sox system, Edgar Cuero, Kai Busch, left-hander there from LA. In terms of acquiring these guys, what does this mean for the direction? I know Rick Hahn has been hesitant to put a label on it, but for what I'm seeing in these returns, and they're reluctant, being reluctant to move on from Cease, and even Bummer has been thrown in there. And then I think a previous report from John Heyman over about a month ago or so was that, Robert's not going anywhere either. I think that was pretty straightforward, though. Eloy Vaughn included among that group, and CC mentioned there too. I think it depends, what's going on for this off season. Are you going to go out in free agency and actually spend, as Boob had reported, that they could be a player in that market, and that would be more of a retool then? Or are you stripping it down to the studs, and are we going back to the grainy video rebuild world here?
I think you're in two different lanes here, Jonnie, and that's what makes this sort of ultra confusing. Yes, you can see the White Sox front office is focused on moving players on expiring deals to recoup prospect capital. Sure, that's fine. Obviously, you need to do that in this situation. However, I didn't think we would be at the point where we need to call in a whole nother contracting company to come fix the house that we were spending 5 years to build. That's the problem here. Everything that's going on right now is a recognition that the White Sox failed, and White Sox being very, very loose term here. The front office, the players, the owner, everybody involved failed putting together a product that they said that they were going to do, so. You can move on from some of these guys. Are we going to miss Lucas Giolito? Probably. In rotation, where he was probably your number 1 arm this season, you're going to miss those innings down the stretch. Does that mean that you've recouped the best prospects the same way that we did when we moved on from Chris Sale and Jose Quintana and went through the last rebuild? No, but at the same juncture, you've got a lineup still that has holes within it. Second base has been an issue. You still have a logjam at third. What's going to go on at catcher? You hear on the post-game show today that, the White Sox are basically offering up Yasmani Grandal for free to move on from him. I know we've acquired a couple of catching prospects. Are they going to be ready next year? Because you hear
they're both Zach Collins.
Yeah, you hear the talking heads say we're going to compete next season. I don't see a lot here right now at this very moment that says, okay, we've plugged any holes or there's any real, solid options that are going to come through this system from the trades that were made that are going to make the White Sox better next season. Because that's what was said now. We're competing in 2024 and crap like that.
I mean, Rick Hahn wasn't going to go and say crap like that. He wouldn't go either way on that.
Well, who did the report come from? Was it Bob Nightingale? So it might be.
Well, that was kind of
with a grain of salt.
Right, and that was kind of like more of a bandying about. It wasn't that the White Sox are going to. It said, with freeing up.
Well, he said that they were focused on, competing next season, and that this wasn't a full-on rebuild, and that they were going to be big players in free agency. We've heard all this shit before. We've heard it so many times that it doesn't mean anything.
Oh yeah, no, I wouldn't say that I believe it, but if I had to pick a direction, I would go the retool route instead of a rebuild. Hey, I hate rebuilds. I hate fuck the grainy prospect highlight videos. I don't want to go watching that shit, and I don't trust any of these guys that we got in our player development society. That's more of a reflection on our player development staff than it is on the prospects that were acquired. I'm sure some of these guys have some skill and talent, but we obviously haven't seen a crop of them come up, be developed properly, and work out at the big league level together. So, you know what? Fuck, I really hope that Boob is right in that they will go out and spend this year to try and plug some of those holes. Fucking trade for a catcher if you need to. We don't need the Astros AAA guy and Sebi Zavala being our duo next year. I'll be honest, I would be on board with a retool. I know they're between a rock and a hard place here. At least that's what it feels like right now. But my crap like that would be, if I'm going to put a label on it, would be a retool for next year, honestly.
I think where I'm sort of skeptical on this is the free agent class next year is not super pretty. It doesn't allow for you to go grab at the top of the market as many impact players as you had opportunities to do so over the past 5 fucking seasons. So, at what point are they going to strike and do something worthwhile? You saw them go out and spend money on guys like Joe Kelly. You saw them go out and spend money on guys like Yasmani Grandal, Kendall Graveman, all of these other names that are now being ushered out of here. At some point, you do have to have faith, but I think my issue with this is it's the same front office that brought you to the
Right.
result that you are in right now. Yeah, it just makes me
Yeah.
angry now that I
I
think
think
about it more and say it out loud.
you go back to the root cause, and you start at the top and Jerry, and then who employs, the loyalty factor that's there, and then who stays employed. Rick Hahn, Kenny Williams, the tweet about the tenure of GMs and their record has been thrown out there so many times regarding this. Look, I get it. That is an issue, and it needs to be uprooted if you really want meaningful change for this organization going forward. But I also operate in a world of reality, and do you see those guys getting canned this offseason? That would be great. I really hope that would be
There
the
are
case.
people out there
It's
that
time.
believe that that's going to happen.
It's time. It's time for that to happen. But as we sit right here on July 30th, I'm still going to operate under the assumption that Jerry is staying loyal to his guys who he's stayed loyal to here. And they're going to be the ones, unfortunately, making the decisions. I don't trust Rakan as far as I can throw him. But if you give me an option of stripping it down to the studs and, banking on these guys in 3-4 years, once again, going up and through the White Sox player development system and then making an impact there. And you didn't start from the same place that you did with those other guys there in terms of the the flashiness of the prospects. And sure, and that's another discussion too, because a prospect is just a prospect. They need to come up and actually prove it. So we've learned our lesson on that front. But yeah, it's a really tough place to be in. So on one hand, I do kind of while we like to joke about it, and that was a funny quote, Rickon saying crap like that, that probably is the best route for him to go, to say that, we'll kind of have more clarity on that as the season winds down and you're getting into the off season, because they're gonna have a lot of time to reflect on that, while other rebuilds that are working out are playing competitive baseball into October, and the White Sox go and hit the golf course.
Yeah, and man, the problem with this for me really is the fact that yes, we can sit here and say that's the best course of action for Rick Hahn, right? The best course of action for Rick Hahn is to, throw no label on this, potentially call it a retool, leak through the media that this is going to be we might be players in free agency, we might do all, because all it does is buy time. It buys time to get to the end of the year to cook up a plan that they were not prepared for this thing to fall apart as quickly as it did and as ugly as it did this season. Coming into this year, a lot of people thought TLR's gone. we're going to be competitive now. You've got a new voice in here. He's going to extract all this value out of this same group of players, plus Mike Clevenger, minus Johnny Cueto. That didn't happen. It in fact, it fell flat on its face out the gate and got progressively worse through the season. And now you have to listen to post-game shows where Pedro Grifol stands in front of a microphone and talks about building a new culture, doing all these other different, evaluations, and everybody's being evaluated. And it's almost like you're back to square one, right? We're evaluating everything. When you hear these terms, it's an organization that's in turmoil. I don't have faith that you get this right in time to extract the value out of Luis Robert, to extract the value out of a guy like even a Jake Berger or a Dylan Cease. You throw these top tier names out. So when you do have to go rebuild, those are the guys that you're going to trade potentially on the last years of their deals, respectively, and not get the same value out of guys like, that are top tier, where you wind up in the same rebuild situation. It's piecemeal. It's putting it together because this one didn't work out. And yes, I agree with you. I'd like them to retool and try these things. I have no faith that they can actually get it right, because they didn't get it right when they did the full fucking teardown. So what makes you think that the patchwork repairs are going to be anything better than what you got here? That's just my personal evaluation of the situation. So it's a frustrating spot to be in, and I think a lot of Sox fans would agree with that.
Right. I understand that sentiment. And in an ideal world, it would be clean house at the end of the season, right? That would be the White Sox fans' dream. But if we're operating under this, and my options are scorched earth again, down to the studs, fucking, because you're talking about trading these guys in their in the last years of their deals. Sure, if you go through the retool and that doesn't work out, then you're doing it there. But if they do end up having a new direction in the offseason, when they figure out what the crap like that is there, and there's always possibility for offseason trades or trading them next season. We get the trade deadline swap there with the guys with multiple years of control there. So like I said, I would like to see a new regime making these decisions. I just don't know if that'll happen. I highly doubt that'll happen, because
when is the
White
last
Sox, after all?
When is the last time, Johnny, you remember the White Sox having two of the top 3 home run hitters in the American League and being, 20 some odd games under 500? I mean, we sat there last year. We don't hit enough home runs. Well, now you got two of the top, and one of them bats in the bottom of your order for whatever fucking reason. He bats in the bottom of the order, and Jake Berger. And then you've got Luis Robert, and we're sitting here fucking struggling. It makes no sense. You can have your cake, but you can't eat it, or you can eat shit. That's the options you have here.
Yeah. That's the predicament we find ourselves in as White Sox fans. All right, Tony, there's a few lingering sort of topics here regarding the trade deadline. You guys discussed Giolito trade. Lance Lynn, Joe Kelly, sad to see the big bastard go, but obviously it was time. We all knew that was going to happen. He was talking about there. You get some of these guys that are coming back. Nestrini, you talked about him a little bit, Leisure, and then Trace Thompson, old friend, coming back, and then you get a minor league catcher, Corey Lee, in exchange for Kendall Graveman from the Astros there. I just wanted to, reiterate that fuck the grainy prospect highlight videos there. Then not buying into these guys, and especially in the White Sox player development here.
Johnny wants HD cameras at every White Sox affiliate.
Yeah, well, honest,
and he'll be happy.
Aside from that, would make it a lot easier to be able to stomach those, because it is kind of hard. That Barron's angle is terrible. It's brutal. Their setup down there in Birmingham is rough, and unfortunately, that's where most of the whatever highly touted names, so to say, would be, right? Because talk about double.
Are we going to get Project Birmingham 2.0?
Yeah, new HD or 4K camera installation down there. Yeah, yeah, that's the Project Birmingham that we're working on this offseason. Thoughts on these returns? What did I text you yesterday? Just assume from a baseline, since we know what the White Sox player development does here, just assume that all the catchers they got are Zach Collins, and all the pitchers are Zach Birdie.
There you go. I told you in response, or maybe I said this first. I said Nick Nastrini, good Italian name. I like that. You know, we like to root for our brethren. So I like the Nick Nastrini name. I don't know enough about his stuff to really, give you a full rundown on him. Jordan Leisure, that's a cool name too. So we like him. Trace Thompson, we've seen him. Some people call him Tracy. I know he's got a brother that plays basketball. He's beginning a rehab stint down in AAA Charlotte.
Yeah,
Just saw that news come through. So I think we're going to get some mid-August, maybe early September, Trace Thompson, reunion out in the outfield at 35th and Shields.
Third stint with the White Sox organization. How about that for Trace Thompson? It's funny. During his second one, when he was here in 2018, and we were just plugging holes all over the field, right? There was one cool moment. I was at a game, and it was like a Tuesday or Wednesday night. I believe they were playing Minnesota. But 2018, it was still early in the season, so bad weather plus the rebuild, making it very lowly attended. I was sitting right behind the White Sox dugout, and he hit a walk-off home run. That was the one memory I have of Trace Thompson. But you know what?
Are they going to pull those highlights? Somebody's got to pull those highlights for the.
I can find that, dude. Oh man, I still have the video that I took of, because I got a good live video of it when he was hitting it. So I'll have to go and resurrect that. But it's just funny that he's back. And you know what also is he went and just had, not that he's a world beater, an everyday player, but that's what LA does. They go and just pick up guys and be able to plug and play and put them in the best situations there. It was funny that there was a stretch where he was just hitting a power surge, and he was hitting a fair amount of home runs for the Dodgers. I believe that was at some point last year. And then he went on the IL fairly early on this season, coming back from it now. But he's probably going to come here and keep that slash line in the hundreds.
Well, you never know. There could be a late season power surge from Trace Thompson. I'm just wondering, can Trace Thompson make the ballpark mix volume? What are we on? Close to 5 here, Johnny. Ballpark mix volume 4 or 5, whatever number we're at for next year. Maybe we can get the walk-off home run from Trace next season and pump that in lap B a little bit.
I'd like to keep it recent, so if you could hit one this season, then sure, that'd be great. One other note that I had on these was, we were talking about return. There was nothing official, but bandied about, especially that you mentioned earlier, in that the White Sox are essentially looking to give away Yasmani Grandal, and obviously he's on an expiring deal. He's not going to be around next year. So the premise that if he does remain with the team, that they could DFA him and bring up this Corey Lee that they got in exchange from Kendall Graven for the Astros, because he's a AAA catcher there. And then your duo is essentially a pair of AAA catchers, because Seby Zavala is still there with the bat in my mind. So any thoughts on that possibility happening? I mean, the scorched earth crowd is just, yeah, sure, that's fine. That's what needs to be done. And you throw veterans.
You're not going to get.
You throw veterans to the side into the dumpster when they no longer are 28 years old.
You're going to get nothing for Yasmani Grandal, especially when your post-game shows talking about giving him away for free. I would rather just have Yasmani Grandal on the White Sox for the remainder of the season at this point. Just personally, because he's more pleasant to watch play baseball games than, Seby Zavala and probably whatever AAA catcher we're going to bring up here. I could be totally wrong. I could be completely wrong on this, and maybe we need to develop these guys. However, he at one point was the highest paid player in the Chicago White Sox history. Largest contract ever signed before we brought on Andrew Benintendi. But that's the problem that we have here, Johnny, is that you're talking about giving away some of the highest paid players in your organization's history for nothing. If you can get any sort of something back for them, that is a fireable offense, I think, for almost any other GM in any other organization. it's a sad spot to be in. Just ride it out with Yaz. I don't think that there's any
Right.
reason why you can't bring up a Kai Bush or who was it, Edgar Aquero, for a tryout here down the stretch as we get near September.
That
They've already carried 3 catchers before with Carlos Perez on the roster.
Perez,
so
there's
why are we dumping people just
right.
for the sake to dump people?
There's a little bit of a stipulation though with that. Corey Lee is dealing with an oblique strain, I believe, as well. I want to say that's what Trace Thompson had as well. But I believe that's sometime in like August, so it should be fairly soon when he's able to join AAA Charlotte. But like Trace is getting back in with that rehab assignment right now. I'm pretty sure he's not at that point just yet, because the report that I just read was sometime in early to mid August when this Corey Lee could be back. So I don't know. I just wanted to bring that up because you're gonna have a hole at catcher regardless whether Yaz stays here for the rest of the year or they DFA him or if they trade him, whatever. You're gonna have a hole at catcher, and like I said, that's not extremely promising. Sebi Zavala, Corey Lee, sort of tandem in my mind. So that's where, if I'm going to retool, that's where you got to look. And I know there's probably some cheap veteran catchers that you can go and get on the market, but you're serious about it, you may need to trade for a catcher. I talked with Sean about that on Friday night.
Like a major league catcher?
Yeah,
a major league catcher? Not like a prospect catcher?
Yeah, okay. Right. Yeah.
Didn't they have the chance to do that with Murphy this past offseason?
Yeah, they were involved in that, but obviously, Atlanta was able to pull that one off. All right, there's a couple more questions related to the trade deadline I want to get to. Who else gets moved? We're still got Monday and into Tuesday for this trade deadline. Who else do you think is on the move there for the White Sox?
I think you'll see Middleton go. His name's come up a couple of 2-3 times here so far. I think you'll see him move. Nothing spectacular in return, just sort of a transaction there, if you will. I wouldn't be surprised to see one position player move from this group. I've sort of seen some rumblings of the Brewers being interested in Eloy Jimenez. I don't know if the White Sox are going to do that. I've got sort of a love-hate relationship with Eloy. I think a lot of White Sox fans do, in terms of his injury proneness. We're not allowed to call him that or anybody else on the White Sox roster injury prone. So maybe his proneness to go on the IL. But the Brewers are interested potentially in bringing him on board. And then there's, the one name that could get focused on very heavily here over the next 2 days, Tim Anderson. Now, got the monkey off the back, hit the home run. You saw him play second base in the World Baseball Classic, as well as had a short stint there earlier this season when he was coming back from injury. Will somebody put together a trade package for Tim Anderson? I know the White Sox have said that they don't want to move him in certain regards, but I did hear on the postgame show today that they will listen to offers for TA. Now, I don't know how you fall in terms of the move TA or retain TA camp, Jonnie, but there was also talk that I saw today that Colson Montgomery is going to move up into the top 10 prospects in all of baseball when they do update this. So they do have a clear-cut sort of prospect answer waiting in the wings. Is TA's value
I'd push back on that.
Worth moving him?
I'd push back on that Colson Montgomery thing, and this is part of my answer too, because I would probably be weary in that regard. I mean, sure, if you get an offer that's going to blow your socks off, then yeah, and you can deal with it and play the Lenny Sosas at short, and you got a couple of other names too.
You move Elvis Andrus over to shortstop for the rest of the season. You get Jake Berger into the order.
Oh, well, that's that. I'm talking about for next season, though. I wouldn't say Colson Montgomery.
I think this is where you draw.
He's still hitting it. What fucking high A? That's where they've been keeping him after the injury. So he lost also a good chunk of early part of this season due to injury. There's no way that that'd be.
I don't think he's coming up next year, but I think this is where you make the determination, Jonnie, whether or not
you don't have to do it right. You can do it. You can pick up the option for next year and hope TA's actually back to his normal self, and then try to flip him at the deadline next year. That would be more of my route.
I just wonder, from a baseball GM standpoint, like, is it worth it for the contractual level right now? Where's his value higher? He's had a shit year. Is it worth it to move him as a rental this year and plug him in next year into
Yeah.
whatever lineup he's traded? I don't know how to value that
I think
at all.
it's hard just because of how rough it's been for him after coming back from the injury, just the lack of offensive production. And sure, you could go and point to the post All-Star break numbers and say that, yes, he is definitely looking more like his normal self. I don't know if that's a big enough sample size to say that that's proven that he is totally back there yet, though. Just hitting the one home run last night doesn't, I don't know, if I'm a rival executive, yeah, that's a positive trend and maybe something you keep an eye on. But at the same time, you're also probably hoping you can buy low on something like that and take advantage of the down year that he had, and then hope that he has a second half, full on resurgence here for you. Whereas that's kind of in my mind be determined on what other clubs are willing to actually give up for him. And when you think about it from their perspective, why would we go and surrender, this prospect that has X value that we place on him internally for a guy that objectively has lower value based on what he's done this year in his injury history?
And that's totally fair. I sit there and sort of think about that. And one thing that sort of comes to mind as we're talking about some of this, Jonnie, is the White Sox inability to have a farm system to go add when they needed to, the way that they could have over the past 2 seasons, in terms of, having prospects to move for a guy who might be down, like a Tim Anderson. We couldn't even make trades like that, which makes me even more sad. Like, go take a chance on someone. We'll have to see what shakes out, but I wouldn't be surprised to see one of those two names move. I'd like to see.
Marlins had, talking about TA here, Marlins had some interest reported, but it wasn't that they were in talks or anything. That's just they were eyeing him for need. And, they've had some struggles offensively this year. So if TA's turned it around, that may catch their eye a little bit. And then I have not seen any reports of interest or talks going on. But everybody says when you go and look at needs across the league and for contenders, the Giants need middle infield help. So that's another name that has just been, once again, thought of as a desirable destination in terms of team need. So,
can I interest you in a Zach Remillard?
Zach Remillard, that guy is TWTW. I'll tell you.
He does. He does. Yoan Moncada.
Oh God,
I would love to see a Yoan Moncada trade.
Dude, nobody's taking him, and
I know nobody's taking him.
We're going to be strapped with him next year too.
Isn't that wild to think about where we started and where we're at with Yoan Moncada? It's kind of wild. It's very wild to think about.
It's then also obviously the player, that's the part of it that we all see on the day-to-day. But then when you go back and then talk about Rick Hahn decision making, well, the decision to give all these guys those extensions, right, up front before anyone was really proven, seemed like, if things did all pan out, probably a good strategy, because you would be avoiding some earlier free agency sort of situations there, lock in that cost and then hopefully be able to add around it. I'm sure that was the plan in mind, but that all never came together. And then now you're seeing the opposite end of it and how that can cripple you in a way, because you have a guy in Jake Berger who is outperforming him, is staying healthy, and is hitting a lot of home runs, which you were just hoping that he would do and bring the defense on top of it. So sure, there's a knock on Jake's defensive game, but I don't think it's lost on anyone what he's done at the plate this year. So, well, maybe Pedro Grifol with where he's batting it, but you get the idea. So that's just the predicament that you're in. And, that is unfortunately the dead weight that they're going to carry into next season. That's where I'm at on Yoan Moncada.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen. I'm curious to see if you wind up making any moves with the position players, because we've yet to see that. Again, we went over Clevenger earlier. I don't think he's moving. Nobody's taking Michael Kopech right now. They've drawn a hard line on Dylan Cease. Middleton's probably available. I don't think the White Sox are going to want to move Santos. Everybody else in the bullpen at this point in time is either a recent call-up or is named Brian Shaw, who's been on a bus back and forth between Charlotte and Chicago for what seems like the better part of a month and a half here. So there's not a lot of assets I think they can deal with. Everything else is sort of going to be focused, I believe, on position players. Don't see Vaughn moving. The one that's out there, obviously, Yasmani Grandal can be had for literally anything at this point. So I think we're sort of past the bulk of the trades for the Chicago White Sox, but you never know. I would say that if somebody's going to move, it's probably an Eloy or a Tim Anderson. That would be like an impactful trade that we would have to like do an emergency podcast for.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm with you on that front. It'd probably be up front there with position players more. I'm wondering just with the Keenan Middleton thing, though. I'm wondering if his recent blowups have scared teams off. This is a guy, Joe Kelly. You can go back and you can go and look at his, numbers from years past in this, whatever, almost like 60 innings of postseason experience. He had the relationship with the Dodgers before. That you can go and rest and be like, okay, you can get some pedigree here. Middleton doesn't really have a track record. What was his best track record? Of being a decent reliever in May and June? Parts of June for the White Sox? And I don't know if that's enough to really move the needle for any team. Maybe someone just takes a flyer. And once again, you're just getting something, a very, very fringe level prospect back on that. So I honestly wonder if Middleton will even be on the move. That's just, if I was a contender looking at that, and people say, oh, that's not how it works. Trade value doesn't tank over, just their most recent outing. Well, okay, all of his most recent outings haven't been all that great. So, and there's been some bad blowups within there too. So
yeah, it's been sort of ugly of late.
Yeah, so it's I like Steve's terminology. Did he turn back into a pumpkin? And that we may have seen that the Chariots here.
You never know if they are able to move him, but as I said earlier, I don't think you're going to get anything worthwhile. It's sort of a lottery ticket, and you can go back to stuff that Steve says about lottery tickets, but I don't expect anything major unless it comes in the form of Eloy Jimenez or Tim Anderson. Those are my thoughts.
Yep. Nope. I think that's a good place to wrap it up. Obviously, trade deadline coming up on Tuesday. So make sure check out ontapsportsnet.com for any updates on the White Sox front there. We'll keep you posted there. Give us a follow on social media as well at Sox on Tap and at OnTap Sportsnet. And for more of these shows, get your comments in the comment section here on YouTube, on Tap Sportsnet, and on Facebook as well. Unfortunately, Twitter folks, we cannot bring your comments into the chat like that here into our feed. So go and check out YouTube and Facebook on that front. Tony, final thoughts, and then it's time to wrap her up.
Final thoughts. What a shitty year to be a White Sox fan, Johnny. I know that we've been
a previously recorded message from shows prior.
Yeah, what a shitty year to be a White Sox fan. I fucking hate every little bit of where we're at right now. It's been pretty bad. I'm sort of sad that we've had to part ways with a couple of names here, but it is what it is at this point. We don't know what we're going to be talking about over the next year from now when it comes to this White Sox baseball team, because we don't have a marketing slogan, and we shouldn't be talking about crap like that right now.
I'm going to talk about crap like that. Clean house if you can in the offseason, please. That's my number one preferred course of action. If you can't, retool, but actually do it and have some shame for what you went through over this contention window, and do what you need to do to fix it in short order, because I'm not on board with this front office getting another rebuild. But if they're going to have to remain in place because Jerry's just a loyal guy and that's what it's going to be, have some shame, Rick Hahn, have some shame, Jerry Reinsdorf. Go actually make it happen, retool. Yale Central is still not going to be a world beater division next year. There are 3 wild card spots now. There is, it seems so far away from a morale standpoint, but at the same time, I would much rather go for it if you're still having the Dylan Ceases, Luis Roberts of the world on your team. then absolutely go scorched earth and be waiting for another 4 years just for a chance to even sniff anywhere up into those playoff spots. So even that being a fringe one there. So that's where I'm at. That's my final thought for this one. Thanks for tuning in to Sunday Funday. Until next time, White Sox forever.
White Sox forever.